if I can start by asking Debbie if you could introduce yourself and, I say, just let us know who you are, where you're from, and I can't remember the questions now. I asked you two things, didn't I? One opportunity, one barrier. So if you could, I keep forgetting. I don't know. My brain's somewhere else this morning.
Well, I know the first answer. So I'm Debbie Frearson. I work for the Council for British Archaeology. I'm the Festival of Archaeology coordinator. I've had different roles with the Council for British Archaeology over the years. I've been local heritage engagement coordinator, training officer. So I published the survey that Brendan mentioned, and now I coordinate the Festival of Archaeology, which as if any of you don't know, it occurs in the last 2 weeks of July, with events throughout that period, and a lot of them are organised by volunteers. I've also started a PhD by practice focusing on community archaeology, so it's really interested with Grace's, focusing from a bottom-up approach from the volunteers as well. I'm looking at sort of social network theory and all the different connections that are made, and also the costs of volunteering and the individual volunteers. So the first question that you wanted to say was what the benefits of non-invasive. I am a benefit of non-invasive because I came into archaeology as an adult. I had a career in admin. I was PA to a managing director of the leisure industry in nightclubs, believe it. And I only got the skills that I needed to be in my job now, apart from the admin, through volunteering. So I went to university as an adult, but there was no field school at my university. The volunteering groups that I went to, a lot of them had professionals from ULAS actually. I'm based in Rutland in that area. And I didn't understand a lot about the historic environment record, the different skill set, non-excavation skill set. From an admin point of view, I didn't understand how community groups worked or how funding was. So the benefits of non-excavation is for people like me, it opens up a whole new world. And I was the first person in my family to go to university, and I was 40. So volunteering and non-excavation techniques helped me to do that. And then the benefit of that is that's trickle fed down. So now I manage a whole cohort of volunteers through the Council for British Archaeology, and we have a lot of volunteers through our 5 strands, and none of it is invasive at all. I'm going to just focus on one of the disadvantages. A lot of my best practice comes from being treated by bad practice volunteers. But one of the things that I wanted to talk about and focus, particularly with what Gary said, was legacy. So you're going to hand over your project to the community. You need to do that 2 years before your project ends, because what you don't realise is that if you're going to hand over to a community, in order to get a bank account these days, you need to have a constitution, you need to have a charitable number, you have to have a succession plan, because as we've all seen from all the data here, it's an ageing population who are there. So how's that going to go? And one of the big aspects as well for me is safeguarding. As a volunteer, none of the organisations that I volunteered for, apart from the CBA, I have to put an exception there, had any safeguarding in place at all. And also, nobody knew me. It was a case of, I need a free workforce, who can I have to volunteer? I have never been asked once, except for the CBA, have I got a criminal record, and have what my skill set are. Nobody's matched my skill set. I've been seen as a number. So I realised that in the here you have the talks that you've had here. You do recruit people in a really good way on these projects, but I think that's an exception actually. The other thing is working in collaboration as well. If you don't have a good collaboration, so we work with the festival with the National Trust and Tom, as Gary and some of the other speakers have said, a big organisation has set procedures, whereas at the CBA we're a bit skateboardy. We're legal, but what we do is we're a small organisation and a small team with a varied background, and we've had to adapt really quickly. So where it takes a bit longer for certain things like messages to be out or certain things to be implicated as collaborators, we're able to say, oh, we can take that bit of the project on and deal with that bit for you, because it might take you a year to be able to get approval for that side of it. So it's a good and a bad thing on on the benefit side if you don't plan ahead and just have a really good relationship and treat your volunteers as individuals rather than a faceless volunteer. That's where the benefit is. And some of the really inspirational talks that I've seen today are where volunteers have been treated as an individual, because you don't know which one of your volunteers is a zillionaire as well and who really wants to. I was on the Roman Villa dig, we were in a trench, and a lady said, I've just given £100,000 to the cat protection fee because I didn't realise that this project was voluntary led and ULAS, and Historic England obviously gave a lot of money. I'm going to think where I want my philanthropy, and I was with my trowel, just offered us some cake. But that's what and that's where, although you don't see every volunteer as a potential funder, what you don't know, the impact of what you do can then further enable. And so a lot of the projects that I see, volunteers are just seen as faceless. So that's the prospect that I'm coming from.
Hi, I'm Tom Dommett. I'm Head of Historic Environment for the National Trust. So the way the Trust carves things up, that basically means if it's old and it doesn't have a roof, it's sort of in my bag. I work to our fantastic archaeologists out in the regions and countries across England, Wales and Northern Ireland, who sit in our internal consultancy service. And I manage a team of specialists centrally who have expertise in climate and heritage, public participation, nature recovery in the historic environment, and our HBSMR. One benefit, I'm going to zoom right out from that kind of personal and sort of take this right back out to framing the role of non-intrusive as being really fundamental to the sustainability of archaeology and heritage going forward, if that's not too grandiose. There's something that I'm going to misquote from a paper that was in response to a Faro Convention that was along the lines that heritage that is everywhere and every day is the precondition of sustainability. And I absolutely agree with that. And to me, that really means building at scale long-term engaged communities around our heritage that have genuine connections to our heritage, because that's what both demonstrates the value of the heritage that we hold, but also creates the conditions to release the potential value. And I think we've seen that across the talks that we've heard today. And so I'm going to just, as a provocation and to take some extreme sides, I'm going to construct a bit of a false dichotomy between intrusive and non-intrusive, bearing in mind the caveat that Duncan put at the very beginning of this talk. This isn't anti-it, but that hopefully echoes some of the things that we've heard across the talks, and hopefully links through to the National Trust cause as well. So we might look at intrusive work as often being highly specialized, often very hierarchical. It often involves external input coming in, whereas the non-intrusive has the opportunity and potential to be much more democratic, to be more diverse, more greater opportunities for mass participation. It was brilliant to see the results of the Dig Ventures work, and ultimately more community-led. It's sort of the difference between that intrusive sense of the expert saying what it is and the non-intrusive opening up those opportunities for the community to talk about what it means, and a sense that there is the opportunity there to really invite kind of multiple perspectives. And for the trust, when we talk about being for everyone, that feels really important to us. The second strand would be around intrusive work by its very nature being in a moment. I would say it's a one-off. It is literally extractive as a process. And we might see non-intrusive as more cyclical, more generational, more around legacy and that bequest value for future generations that we've heard about. It's often repeatable, and it's about putting those layers of meaning and understanding on top of each other in a kind of cumulative process. And the NT talks about being forever and for everyone, and absolutely that aspect of the non-intrusive work kind of rings through. And then the third one is that intrusive work is typically operating at quite a discrete scale, whether it's the site or the individual feature, while the non-intrusive focus can really open up those opportunities to think about landscape, to think about place in a more holistic way, to draw in those discussions around nature, around climate, around people. And so maybe the National Trust needs to add to its for everyone, for everywhere, for everyone, forever, and add and everywhere, although that does sound a little bit kind of global domination-y. So maybe not. But I do think shifting some of this balance from the focus on the intrusive to the focus on the non-intrusive can open up some huge opportunities to think differently and to think in terms of building communities around heritage in a different way. I think the big barrier to that would be a cultural one that I would pick out, and that starts becoming about control and well, Gary mentioned, I think you can't turn up to engage communities with a fixed idea of what you want to do or want them to do. It has to be about meeting them on their terms and understanding what interests them and what engages them and what they would like to decide. And so being flexible enough to accommodate that, having enough trust to place in those different communities to let them decide what interests them and what doesn't. And ultimately accept perhaps that the outcomes for heritage might not be exactly what we had envisaged or we might have decided as experts or specialists, but shifting that philosophy from the outcome of a conservation project or a heritage project maybe not being about the perfectly conserved building or church, and actually it's about the community that has been built through that activity. It's about the sharing of perspectives, the building of relationships, the developing of skills, the growing of confidence in individuals that ultimately feels really like the most important thing in the long term in terms of looking after the heritage that we have.
So if there's any questions or comments, happy to just take, if you want to make a statement, just let us know. Wow, we've stunned into silence, have we? One of the things I wanted to just pick up on a little bit was that I think there's an interesting debate to be had around ownership. The National Trust is very lucky that the scheme we've developed and we're pushing forward. We're very lucky. We own the land. So if we want to send, if we want volunteers to go out and visit somewhere, we just point them in the right direction and off they go and do it. And Thomas has raised the very valid point that even on scheduled monuments, there is no right of access. So there is a bit of a challenge around access to land. If we would genuinely want to develop a scheme like the Hart scheme or like the scheme in the national park, and there are others around the country of similar nature, if we really genuinely want to develop that, how do we get that access? That to me is a huge barrier to actually understanding what's going on in our landscapes, and I'm not sure how we overcome that.
Thank you very much. It's Matt Ritchie from Forestry and Land Scotland. I was just wondering, and with that in mind, whether all of the fantastic talks we've heard this later session can be transported or transposed into areas of land that are less fortunate than being national parks or National Trust properties. So I'm thinking like Brendan's project, would the volunteers get the value from a less fortunate bit of land with less interesting sites to discover, or less of the framework for the monitoring, etc. So it's all about scale, I suppose, is what I'm thinking, whether it's be a small site or a landscape to massive estates.
Can I do it from a volunteer perspective? If you're a fantastic volunteer manager, it doesn't really matter where you are. You will, if you've got it's all about land management, it seems to be in here, rather than volunteer management. So you're talking about the benefit, but as a skilled volunteer manager, you can take people to most places, and the benefit would be amazing. It doesn't matter. It's more that if you're in a really remote area, obviously it's about accessibility and that experience. But a successful volunteer project has usually had an amazing volunteer manager involved.
I think we typically undervalue the process of doing archaeology and overvalue the discovery element of it. Yeah, it's been really fascinating, even some of the experiments that we've done within the Trust. We worked at Sutton Hoo doing geophysical surveys, and we opened that up to visitors to participate, including in magnetometry surveys. And some of us might not think it's the most fascinating thing to walk up and down in a line listening to beeps. And we might think it's even less fascinating when we're wearing bits of metal on us that turn the data into guff. But the visitors didn't feel that. They weren't concerned, really, that the data that they were capturing wasn't perfect or wasn't very good. They enjoyed it just as much for doing the process and feeling like they were part of a process that was happening over and above the idea of discovery. So I think for us to put more faith in how interesting and engaging the process is and that learning is really important.
Hi, Matt. So just to come back, yes, our pilot project was based in an area of lowland County Durham, a 220 square kilometre area that was a landscape partnership. But this has conurbations like Bishop Auckland, Shildon, other places in the northeast that aren't kind of recognised often for their beauty. But we did exactly the same. We got the same results, and that was where it started. So it could, but I think the protected landscapes is what's crying out for with the need. You know, that's what's driving nature recovery, and that's what needs this kind of wonderful subfield information to be applied to it. So that's 700 square kilometres is like 1.5 HS2s, and we have to do that every year. Now, we have a model for dealing with that in our lowland areas around development-led archaeology, but this new model, I think, can really contribute to that 40% of the UK that's crying out for the need.
I just wanted to add something following what Tom said, which I think you absolutely nailed it. And I apologize if I sound a little bit naive, but sometimes I feel like we think too much in a box about our own project. I feel that in this room, in this building, we have an amazing community of archaeologists, and the amount of opportunities that we are offering all at the same time on a national level. I mean, we are spoiling people for choice, if I have to be completely honest. And I am the one that when I design a community project, I think, oh my God, I need to make sure that I can tick this, because I want to achieve everything in a 2 weeks project. So maybe we need to think of creating a better network between us, so to allow the wider public and people out there to enter a platform and say, oh, actually, look, I've got this choice. In this one, I can actually walk all day along the coastline in Pembrokeshire. I might encounter archaeology, I might not, but it doesn't matter, because as Tom was saying, it's the multiple benefits that comes out from. So we're all doing an amazing job. We need to stop stressing that we need to tick all the boxes at the same time. So that was just my comment. But again, I might be very naive.
Can I ask Brendan a question? it's totally random. If you had the perfect place to investigate without funding restrictions for your astronauts, where would you choose?
Does that have to be planet Earth? The moon, yeah. LiDAR looks like the moon, right? To me, it's a scale proposition. So the 40% of the UK, working on our metrics of how long it takes to do a thing, if we had 100 professional archaeologists doing this work, it would take 37 years. If we had 1,000 astronauts, it would take 6 years. If we had 10,000, it would take 6 months. So to me, it's a scale model. What really excites me is that speed, that kind of changing how we think about how we do this work to this surveillance, monitoring approach. And like all of it, I would say, all the UK. Be good.
Well, and do it again and again. Because I'm fascinated by the idea that, you know, we're not far away from having incredibly high resolution satellite imagery delivered to us on a very regular basis. And each set of that imagery is going to show us something slightly different every time. And so there is a forever aspect to that we can become a bit overawed by, but we could also really latch onto.
I'm conscious of the time. Oh, we've got another. Go for it. Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry, I'll be quite quick. I'm Vanessa Oakton from Museum of Liverpool. Just in terms of a less rural place and less, we've got lovely landscapes, but, you know, more built up area. One of the community non-intrusive projects we did was recording graffiti. So I noticed one of graffiti in the slide. So using archaeological skills in terms of how we record a site, but on a wall to record the graffiti and use those layers, and then to digitize that. And that really appealed to our young people. And again, so just another thing for those of you whose sites are graffitied. But also to mention it in terms of the safeguarding that Debbie was talking about. We do DBS all of our volunteers, but I do find in terms of community projects that can also be a barrier for some people with minor things who might feel that is a barrier. So it's finding that balance between safety of staff and people in the project and our objects, and also that sort of engagement as well. So I just thought I'd mention those. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's a really valid point about the kind of range of opportunities that, you know, that we focused on, largely rural this morning, and, you know, there are huge opportunities within our urban areas to do, you know, to engage people in a way that we probably haven't done before, and would be hugely advantageous, I'm sure. So I think it's a really valid point. And thank you for that. I'm conscious of time. I'm conscious that you probably all tumbled and stomachs are rumbling, and you realise that yesterday the food queues ended up with empty trays by the time that some of us got there anyway. So I'm going to wrap up, and thank you all very much for coming along. I really like to thank the speakers again. I really enjoyed it. I thought they were fantastic personally, and I hope the rest of you did as well. So thank you all very much. I hope this is the start of a kind of a discussion about, you know, broadening, you know, the debate around what is community archaeology and what community archaeology can be, and the kind of the range of opportunities that we can offer people above and beyond what might be seen as this kind of traditional digging approach. And I say thank you all very much, and traditional way of saying thank you to all our speakers.